Hello, my name is Jane Bempong. This video is about the Deaf President Now, DPN, movement of 1988, which occurred at Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., the world's only liberal arts college for deaf people. DPN had an impact on both deaf and hearing people. Many people, students, faculty, staff, hearing allies, and politicians joined the movement. All over the world, people heard about the movement in different ways. Some others read about DPN in the newspapers and watched on television at the state, national, and international levels. It became known as the Deaf Civil Rights Movement for the first time in the history of America. So why are we making this video 30 years later? It's entitled Undocumented Voices of Deaf Women Leaders, a Historical Analysis. Very little has been documented about deaf women who were involved in DPN. Who are these women? Where are they? Why have they been neglected in deaf American history, women's rights, and disability rights movements for so long? This groundbreaking video takes a critical look, interviewing deaf women leaders about their experiences in DPN, as well as their perspectives about gender, gendered roles, sexism, and feminism in our society. The women also described how they overcame their unique challenges and talk about how their role models influenced them.
My name is Bridgetta Bourne-Firl, and my sign name is BB. I currently live in Frederick, Maryland, and I work at the Laurent Clerc National Deaf Education Center, which is on the Gallaudet campus. I provide technical assistance to school professionals, families, and teachers throughout the nation working with deaf and hard of hearing students from birth to 21 years. I enjoy this kind of work tremendously. I was born in Virginia to deaf parents. At the time, my mother was a Gallaudet student and my father had just graduated from there and was working. After I was born, I attended preschool on Gallaudet campus. Then we moved to Virginia. When I started elementary school, I briefly attended an oral-based program there. It was possible at the time that I was considered an oral failure, as the school asked my parents for me to repeat kindergarten. Not happy, my parents looked for a different program for me based on the total communication method. They decided on the program at the Maryland School for the Deaf in Frederick. We then moved to Frederick, Maryland, where I attended school until graduation. In college, I matriculated in government studies. I had a wonderful professor and role model, Dr. Mary Malz-Kuhn. She truly led, encouraged, and taught me as a government major. I so looked up to her. During the 1988 DPN movement, I was one of the 4 student leaders. We were recognized as the primary leaders, 3 male students, and then 1 female, myself. As an aside, as the 4 student leaders of DPN, we all shared unique common experiences. All of us had deaf parents, so all of us grew up with similar stories told by our parents. For me, especially my dad, he told of his work experience. Through sign language, my dad would share stories of challenges at work, frequent oppression in a hearing environment, the struggles and challenges he faced as a deaf person. At dinner time, all 4 of us students watched, discussed, and learned from our parents as they recounted their struggles and challenges. The 4 of us grew up with the common experience. All 4 of us attended schools for the deaf. 3 out of the 4 of us attended Youth Leadership Camp, YLC, and NAD program, and we also participated in Junior NAD. With similar formative experiences, we all arrived at the same point at Gallaudet and felt we had the ability and strength to give to DPN. At the conclusion of DPN, the 4 of us being young couldn't have foreseen what an impact DPN would have. We were focused on the day-to-day operations. After DPN, I went backpacking with 3 other girls from Gallaudet through Europe. While we were traveling in Europe, we would often run into deaf people who, when they realized we were Gallaudet students, would tell us how empowering DPN was for deaf people all over the world. Deaf people can do it. We had no idea of the international impact of the DPN protest. Even after DPN, we weren't aware of the impact upon the world. They didn't know that I was one of the student leaders. We then realized what an international impact DPN had made. Back home, we saw more and more deaf people achieving success in employment, including my father, who worked in the Department of Defense for many years. Now, most people receive training and then are promoted up the career ladder. Often with deaf people, even after training, they're not promoted, but rather stuck on one rung of the ladder. After my dad's boss saw what was happening with the DPN movement, he finally promoted my dad. For deaf people I've met across the U.S., with the passage of the American with Disabilities Act, ADA, in 1990 and beyond, and in my travels, they've told me about changes, improvements, opportunities for job advancement, like the post office. After DPN, people became aware that deaf people do have abilities, and they were offered opportunities for advancement. That's true across the U.S., and really that's so valuable. At the time of DPN, deaf children ages 5 to 9 years old described how their parents told them to watch the TV news as it was happening, and then they would meet to tell me of how DPN gave them a feeling of belief in their abilities and a sense of pride in being deaf. And again, during the week of DPN, I had no idea of its impact well into the future, but look around. It's amazing that deaf people of all ages have benefited from DPN. In 1988, let's think about the context of the time. In general, let's look at history. Before the feminist movement had begun and the movement for women's rights started to spread, women couldn't get credit cards in their own names. They had to use their husbands' names. Now, growing up, I remember my mother signing things in my father's name. Women were denied so much. But with the protests of the 70s and really, before that, really in the 1920s, women gained rights like the right to vote, and more women started driving. So growing up, I saw more recognition of women's abilities. I grew up at the right time with the start of this. I was lucky to have the opportunity to have women role models. I had several. In the past, my role models didn't have female role models to look up to, as it was a male-dominated society. And again, I was lucky to have several deaf women as role models. At that time, and still today, it was so male-dominated. When I was in high school, boys were lucky. They were lucky because they could go downtown alone, whereas as girls, we weren't allowed to. Now, back to 1988. More men were taking on more leadership roles, and there were women involved in these roles. And just prior to DPN, I remember how I got involved, but let me back up. With the advent of the feminist movement at that time, for the first time, Gallaudet offered a course in feminism. Dr. Mary Malzkuhn taught it. It was an elective. And I remember when taking the course, it had a red cover with a large circle with a plus sign at the bottom, right? Yeah, the feminist symbol. And reading through it, it talked about women's rights and was very descriptive. I started to feel empowered. It raised the question of the presidency. Now, in Gallaudet's history, there had never been a woman president, nor had there been a deaf president to date. And we discussed the need for a deaf president. The time was approaching. But what about a woman president? I felt no one had ever talked about that. I guess I was odd in my thinking, so I raised the question, what about a person being a female being deaf? It hadn't happened yet. Later on, I recall an example. Dr. Roz Rosen brought up a thought experiment. She asked, if you were on a sinking ship and had to choose one of two lifeboats, which would you choose, a boat of all deaf men or a boat of all hearing women? And after thinking about that, which I would choose? Would I choose the deaf men? Yeah, because of communication. Communication in sign. ASL is a must. To be in a boat full of speaking women or to be in a boat with sign? What would I choose? At that time in Gallaudet's history, after our rally on March 1st, we all gathered together. That included one of the speakers, who was Roz. And, I looked at all the other speakers. They were all men. I don't remember any other women speakers. Only Roz, a very strong deaf woman, spoke up. She was someone I looked up to. At the time, she was my boss. I was a student assistant working in her office. And watching her, it really inspired me to get involved in the DPN movement. And that's when I realized having a deaf president was paramount, not a woman president, hence DPN. Some people look down at cheerleaders. I value cheering because it gave me a leadership opportunity. I started cheering in high school, and I ran the pep rallies, developed the schedules, delegated responsibilities for cheering for coaches, basketball and football players, and different parts of the chants. Now, Betty Hicks was my high school coach and role model. She was a strong, deaf woman. This is her sign name. She was also my literature teacher, and she encouraged me to get involved. So I entered a pageant. I didn't want to, but she insisted that deaf people had to show we had abilities. Deaf people can do it, she told me, and she was there to guide and push me. The same thing with theater and cheering. She always told me I could do it. Because of her, I did many things. I'm so grateful for her. People scoff at cheering being a girl thing and not a sport, but cheering gave me leadership opportunities, and all of that led me to DPN. During the week of DPN, we had to communicate through rallies. We had no texting, no wireless communication, no emails. So what we would do is set off the dorm fire alarms, and then the strobes would flash to inform each other that we would meet at rallies. Now, another way that we would get a hold of each other and set up meetings without electronics was through another girl and myself. Another very strong deaf girl was on my team, Deborah Trapani. What she did was drive and drop off other students so they could set off other dorm alarms. And then she would also pick up and drop off students for the rallies. That was her job for the week. Now, I was mainly responsible for organizing rallies and disseminating information to everyone. It was an important role looking back, and that's where cheering and leadership responsibilities had come in handy. So I was the event planner and became heavily involved, which has really shaped my career today. I do remember that time. Looking back at my role, the one thing I remember about being the one woman among the 4 student leaders, I don't know. The fact that there was 1 woman to 3 men didn't matter. We were comfortable arguing with each other. We were in student government together, and we all got along. We were just comfortable with each other. Sometimes the three male student leaders would really get into it with each other, really disagree. Apparently it was natural for me, or I was trained to do it, like with my sisters at home. Being the oldest child, I mediated between them. With DPN, I remember my role calming things down and working things out. And I remember reminding the guys that outside of our group, we needed to present a united front, that we couldn't disagree in public. It would confuse people. That couldn't happen. It was fine to disagree in private, but in public, we had to be united. I insisted on unity, and that was my role. As a result, I might have shared less of my own opinions. I was the peacemaker and keeping us connected. That was my role outside of the public eye. In public, I was responsible for the rallies. In my presentations, I often talk about Dr. Mary Mels-Kuhn. She didn't receive much recognition during DPN. She wasn't in the public eye. She was the one who was always raising points with the four of us. We were all government studies students, and she conversed with us, taught women's rights, pointed out to us various groups who had fought for their rights, and she asked the question, where was the civil protest among the deaf? She continued planting seeds without us realizing it. And without us knowing, she kept on planting seeds, and she really supported us. She was a true silent heroine. And I believe that she passed away 2 years ago. I do miss her. You know, thinking about it, I want to ensure that people do not forget her. As a government studies professor, she actually earned her PhD at 60 years old. A good role model for the young and old. Her dissertation was on the Rowley Case, and she shared her research with us. The case went to the Supreme Court, and it was the only case regarding a deaf person. Have you read her dissertation? No, you didn't? Well, it was published through the University of Maryland, and you know, now talking about it makes me want to read it again. I could ask her children or contact the University of Maryland to see if they have a copy. I know there are copies out there, maybe her family. I do want to read it again. Anyway, Dr. Mels-Kuhn preferred to stay behind the scenes, away from the public eye. She was a big support. Another important unsung deaf person is Marie Phillips. Marie briefly appeared on the scene of DPN, and in that short time, she really made us think. She had come that week to visit and stay with MJ Bienvenue. MJ had picked her up and then surprised her with what was happening. She immediately wanted to talk with the four of us in private. She asked to have a meeting scheduled with us, maybe through Jackie Roth, I'm not sure. But anyway, she was insistent on getting on the schedule that week. She got a meeting with us early in the morning in Old Gym. Now, being young college students, we didn't know who Marie Phillips was, but agreed to meet with her. So we sat down for the meeting. She said her hellos and then said, you know, you're going to be on TV. People the world over will be watching. Rather than using English, please use ASL. This is the opportunity to expose our language to the world. Ooh, you use ASL? We had all grown up with English. And with the world watching us, we were taught that English, full sentences, were really considered intelligent. But this was our opportunity. The world would be watching. And Marie explained to us that, you know, the problem in the past was whether or not we could entrust interpreters to relay the language correctly, to make sure they understood what we were saying and then interpret appropriately. But interpreting as a profession was a new field, just beginning to be recognized. Now, Marie assured us that there were good professional interpreters that could be trusted, and we could use ASL with confidence. Gave us something to think about. I already mentioned other women, my role models. Regarding other women, I feel sometimes, maybe because of past oppression, women have to fight hard, be ambitious, be assertive, and that makes other people uneasy and dismissive of them. I don't know. When men behave in the same way, it's easily accepted. But if women act or are assertive, it's not okay. And why is that? I want to mention that at the time of DPN, I was only 20 years old. I was a young adult with limited experience, knowledge, and perceptions of the world. Jackie Roth and Jane Norman were on the media team. The two of them, being on that team, made decisions as to who would be interviewed. Now, I remember being interviewed once or twice. Maybe they felt my responses were not, well, interviews did rotate between the four student leaders. Greg was interviewed most often because he was chosen by SBG as their spokesperson. And he did a wonderful, amazing job on Nightline and other programs. The rest of us were interviewed less. And then the two other guys were interviewed more than I was. And I did the least of all. Perhaps I wasn't articulate at the time. I don't know. After I watched tapings of DPN events, I realized my signing wasn't clear. I used strong ASL, and maybe it wasn't clear. Looking back now, I wish someone had coached me. A coach could have really advised me on how to sign more clearly. I recently chatted with Greg Kleibach. He didn't mention it at the time, but now 30 years later, he commented that his older brother and Gary Olson and others groomed Greg how to say the right things by using ideas, as well as signing appropriately in front of the media. Clearly, Greg had strong family support. His older brother, his friends, his parents' friends supported him. They all coached him. And that was a good thing because he shook the world. He definitely got people to listen to what he said based on his deaf family and friends' support. Looking back, I wish I had more coaching. I could have done better if I had had such an opportunity. Yet, things were moving so quickly, there wasn't time. Jane Norman and Jackie Roth were running the media team, pulling in interpreters, arranging interviews, really ran it well. Why weren't they interviewed themselves? That's an excellent question. I have no idea. Now I'd like to know myself. Why were the four of us selected rather than other students? Let me give you some historical background. 3 out of the 4 of us were government studies majors. We were made aware of issues through Dr. Mary Malskoon. She would ask us, where's deaf civil protest? And what's more, all 4 of us were involved in the student body government, SBG, the student congress on Gallaudet campus. We were all active in governance leadership roles, competing with each other. Jerry Covell would run for president, and I was vice president. We were all competitive and active. Not many students in the U.S. were really that involved in politics and government. Most people were not, and that's proportional in the deaf community. There are very few deaf people who find it interesting. Most do not. The 4 of us were already actively involved. Tim Braris had just finished a term as president, and Greg had officially stepped in when DPN began. He became the spokesperson. It was the timing. Greg was an SBG leader who was voted in by the student body. He was the official leader, and it made perfect sense. He was who the student wanted, so they picked him. Now, Jerry was also very active, with a strong belief that we needed a deaf president now. He was out there rallying the troops even before DPN. The selection of the 4th student leader was still being debated. Should it be a man or a woman? The protest began on a Sunday, and people flocked to the Mayflower Hotel. We were waiting for several people who had gone up to the board meeting to come back and tell us what was going on. We hadn't even met the person. We felt they owed us an explanation. They went up to the meeting. The others of us stood around, wondering what to do, and I started chanting with other people. That's where my cheerleading background came in. I led the group, and then people tried to get my attention, saying, "It's my turn, it's my turn." So I led everyone in rounds of song and chanting, and after that, we all marched back to Hughes Gym on campus. We held a planning meeting that night, discussing what we would do the next day. There was no leadership structure yet. I don't remember how or why I ended up going to the meeting room. I watched where people were going, and I went along with the crowd. In the room, there were NAD reps, alumni, a group from the Ducks who were in their 30s to offer encouragement to those in their 20s. And there were students there. So we talked about holding a rally, everything that entailed, who would do what, and then I went on stage explaining about the logistics relating to the rally. Monday afternoon, I realized a discussion on leadership was happening in the SBG basement office. The room was full, a little bit confusing, with community people, alums, and the NAD all packed in together. There were older adults from the community who were also in the room. And the discussion was how to have a more clear leadership structure, and a question came up, who would be involved in this leadership? Now, one of the older Ducks said that needed to happen. Greg and Tim were obvious choices, being in SBG, Jerry for his activism. For the fourth person, they plan on asking another male student, but again, some people pointed out there should be a female student in the group. So I was pointed out as the fourth choice. I agreed, and I joined the student leaders, and that's how the four of us were chosen. A little while ago, I was talking with some Gallaudet student ambassadors. After 30 years, they wanted to know more about the history of DPN. In our conversation, there was one African-American student who raised his hand and asked the question talking about diversity, and we had wanted to make sure we were inclusive of different groups. We had to be mindful of that. Anyway, he asked if we had thought about the need for a black student or a person of color on the team, and if that would have been tokenism, and asked me what I thought about that. What I thought was, during the DPN, I could have said no to the position because, being the only woman, that could have been tokenism. Would it be just because I'm female? So I could have said no, but I jumped at the opportunity. I wanted to make an impact for deaf girls and women, and in the future, they could look and see that there was one woman on the team. I could be their role model. Given the chance, I jumped for it. I didn't see it as tokenism. I wanted to show that given the chance, a person can make a difference. It might have started as tokenism, but it can provide a positive impact for your group. In 1988, deaf people of color were involved in DPN, of course, but they were often overlooked. That's why Gallaudet recently held a Unsung Heroes Deaf panel for people of color who were involved in DPN, and panelists talked about their roles. There was one deaf Asian former student who attended a public mainstream school. He worked for the Tower Clock, the yearbook, as a photographer. He was interested in photography, and with a mainstream education, the deaf world was really new to him. He was constantly taking pictures during DPN. We have it documented because of him. At the time, he was a press photographer for the DPN movement. And after Gallaudet, he was invited to discuss his work as a photographer, traveling internationally, capturing different events, making films as well. Yun Lee was his name, participating on panels and lecturing on his photographic work. Let's see, there was another man. What was his name? Hector Boal. Hector, Filipino deaf man. His work was really key for us, the four student leaders. He was almost like a fifth. He was very active working with us. Yeah, Hector Boal was his name. And there were others on the panel as well. During DPN, one thing the panel discussed is that we didn't often talk about people of color, because the focus was really on being deaf, but they did come and join in numbers. Kubi Rashid, she works in administration at Gallaudet now, very nice woman. She was an international deaf student from Nigeria, Africa. She was concerned with her international status and afraid to participate in DPN. She really wanted to be known as a good student focusing on her studies. She saw I was a good student, and we were good friends. She was struggling with her international status, and she was aware I was a citizen of the U.S. We had similar values. Seeing what was happening with DPN, seeing other international students get involved, their struggles, she decided to just jump in and not let her status prevent her from being involved, and she became a part of the Black deaf women of the historic DPN movement. So she's an example of people of color involved in DPN. They weren't recognized at the time, but 30 years later, we are recognizing them. If deaf women had had coaching, I think that it would have been possible, yes, with encouragement. You know, the male students did have coaching. They were young. If I had had coaching, yeah, it would have been possible. Absolutely. At that time, you know, hearing women and deaf men were all part of the historical discussion, but not deaf women. The topic of deaf women wasn't discussed. The feminist woman focused on hearing women, women's rights. Hearing women led that discussion. And discussions within the deaf community focused primarily on deaf men. Remember that experiment I told you about, the boat of hearing women? Why wasn't there a boat of deaf women? Deaf men had a boat, but deaf women were not part of the narrative. This wasn't even considered during that time. And discussions nowadays on deaf women are increasing, and we are seeing more strong deaf women out there. Were deaf people represented through the media well in 1988? Yeah, I believe so. Today, I feel we must be more proactive in support of people of color. We've become much more aware. At the time, with the protests moving so quickly, but I'm pleased with the results of DPN, the international awareness that it earned, the positive stories and views of deaf people. The media was truly on our side, which was part of the reason why DPN succeeded. Through the media, the world heard, yeah, that's the right word, they heard about Gallaudet and took note of us due to the media being on our side all the way. So change was possible, the media supported us clearly, and a deaf president. And society finally understood. The message was clear. In 1988, views in Congress were changing, and the inception of ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was beginning. It was just the right timing. Many societal groups, companies were being made aware. There was a sea change in deaf awareness. Being young at the time of DPN, I can't remember everything perfectly. What I do remember is that the student group and a community alumni group agreed that they both shouldn't meet in the basement. So the older adult group would meet in a separate location, which we called the old gym. And they called themselves the DPN Council, and they were an advisory group to the students. So whatever work the student leaders did, we would bring it to the council. And the council was made up of 4 student leaders, 4 faculty, 4 alumni, and then 4 community people, totaling 16 people in all. So every day, we would have a roundtable meeting to discuss goals and action, like developing the 4 demands. We all wanted to be on the same page. First, the students discussed demands separately. And then we came up with the first 3, which were deaf president now, Spillman to be removed from the board, and 51% of the board to be comprised of deaf people. And then the council suggested we add the fourth demand, that there be no reprisals, no punishment, no firings or loss of jobs, no failing of students because of missed classes. They convinced us of that. They thought of protecting our grades and of protecting faculty and staff jobs due to their involvement. So the students, we agreed to add that to the list, making 4 demands. And then from then on, those demands remained consistent in print, public statements, even the way that we signed them. We maintained consistency. I think she was just ignorant and oblivious. Sometimes today, people who aren't deaf just don't understand. They don't get it about deaf people. And really, Jane Spillman was one of them. For example, prior to the start of DPN, it was said that Chairperson Spillman gave a speech honoring a statue on the Gallaudet campus. Now, facing a crowd of deaf people, she began her speech before an interpreter had even arrived. The interpreter had to make a mad dash for it. Spillman could have checked to see if there was an interpreter ready before beginning. And during DPN, there was a meeting in the gym with board members on stage. And a person asked for the audience to respond to student demands. The gym was full of deaf people wanting to know their response. Jane Spillman, who stood on stage, responded that the board would not meet our demands. They were keeping with their choice of president, Dr. Elizabeth Zinser. So we waved to get her attention and to ask once again if the board would or would not meet our demands. And with her defiant attitude, she continued to say no. We asked one more time with the same reply, and then someone pulled an alarm and people started to leave the gym. She tried to get us to quiet down, saying it was too noisy. She treated us like kids. Can you believe that? And that attitude continued. There was no asking about our thoughts. She could have said, "What do you mean?" But no thoughts about the particular moment in deaf history, nothing. Just her facial expression, very disdainful, looking at us like we were not intelligent beings. Right after the protest, several LA Hollywood producers did want to make a film about the 4 of us telling the DPN story. They saw that we had gotten the world's attention, and they really wanted to jump in on that and tell the story. So, Jackie Roth, she was a key liaison between Hollywood and us. She arranged to get a volunteer female interpreter, whose name I don't remember. Well, anyway, she set up a meeting with herself and the interpreter and several Hollywood companies, and then us. Several different producers contacted us and flew to D.C. to meet with the 4 of us. We met with them several times. And describing their vision, they were offering the opportunity for us to tell the behind-the-scenes story. And we thought about it. But I remember many of them wanted to add some drama and more theatrics. And, we really didn't want that. We were all in our 20s at the time and worried about our reputations. And they said, "Okay, so you're going to have a run-in with the police and you'll do something with drugs." They were throwing in drama for each of us. And we gave them a big no. We were afraid. If future employers saw that, what would our job prospects be? Again, we were in our 20s, graduating soon, and didn't want people to think badly about us. Who would hire us? The 4 of us agreed that wouldn't happen. We wanted to protect ourselves and the reputation of deaf people. At the time, we were a bit naive. We all agreed a documentary would be fine, and they thought that would be too boring. They wanted a feature film, a drama. But we were uneasy. Then Jackie told us they wanted us to sign some kind of contract, put our names on paper. We didn't want to put our names to anything. She tried to explain the politics of Hollywood to us, and at that point, so many people were talking at us and throwing words at us Hollywood style. We weren't ready to sign anything. The conversation got more and more chaotic. We were exposed to the workings of Congress, but we were naive to the ways of Hollywood. Now, Jackie had the background experience working with actors and the film industry. As I think back, if we had gone ahead and signed the contract, would anyone have protected or helped us? They were all so busy talking at us, pressuring us to sign in the box, confusing us. It was moving too fast. We didn't get the politics of Hollywood. And I felt like I was just being told what to do. They, as well as Jackie, were making decisions for me, for my reputation. We asked them if they would just slow down. We asked for a better explanation, but they just kept at us. And feeling enormous pressure, the four of us discussed this idea, and we didn't want to pursue it because we agreed to protect the deaf community from bad publicity. We felt responsible for any stigma if it had occurred. At that time, we were young. We thought it was a bad idea. And 30 years later, I realized Jackie could have made it happen. You know, I'd hoped that she wouldn't have given up and she would have looked for other opportunities. The 1980 NAD conference in Cincinnati, Ohio, was host to a big celebration, 100 years. Now, thankfully, my parents brought me along with them. I was a young kid in 1980. I hung out with my friend, Susie Rosen. We didn't attend any of the specific programs, just walked around and watched what was happening, announcing the next NAD president. They announced Gertie Galloway, the first deaf woman to become president. Right away, my dad got my attention and pointed that out to me. He repeated, "She's the first deaf woman president." Growing up, my dad was always a big support, and he made sure I caught the moment. Through my mother, I had known her as part of the Women's Card Group, but didn't realize how active in the deaf community she was. I thought of her as an ordinary woman, friend of the family, who I had chatted with, but seeing her as the next president of NAD was mind-blowing, inspiring, incredible. I think I was 13 at the time. Let's see, how old was I? Well, I was a young teen. But watching that unfold was a wow moment for me. After that, more women began to appear on the scene. In college, I mainly hung out with guys. We had a lot of similar interests. We liked discussing similar things. There weren't many other female students like me. There were some, but with my male friends, I could have lively discussions. Today, many deaf women have taken off. One important example is Bobby Cordano, Gallaudet's president. What an amazing rise. She is a celebrity all over the world. At the recent NAD conference, she gave an early morning presentation on language vibrancy, and she packed the audience. Morning presentations don't tend to pack the hall, but she did. And I told her she's a celebrity. She didn't plan on becoming a celebrity, but she had wanted to run for Gallaudet University president. But now, people look up at her. We are so proud of her. Yes, that's true. Prior to the protest, even though she was hearing, I had been in support of a woman becoming president rather than the two deaf male candidates. Because being deaf was a part of me, being a woman was a part of me, and I had to weigh those two parts. A woman had never before had the position. I had to give my decision some careful thought. After March 1st of that year, my decision was clear. A deaf person needed to be president of Gallaudet University, and my support swung in that direction 100%. So I am really thrilled that as time went on, Bobby was there at the right time. My advice for the young women and the girls of today, including my own 13-year-old daughter, my daughter participated in a youth pageant at the recent NAD conference. She was serving delegates. The audience was large, and every night in our hotel room after the conference, my daughter and I talked about her experiences. She kept asking me about everything, and she described how she learned about the NAD. She had the opportunity to ask questions and talk with the leaders of NAD, and for her, it really opened up her worldview. It was a golden opportunity for her. So I would advise other young women to look for similar opportunities. Deaf people of color may think about being used, may think about tokenism, but they can seize the opportunity and use it to influence, impact, and make decisions. You can have a key role. You can make a difference. To girls and young women, I say, seize the day, take hold of those opportunities.
We wish we could interview more deaf women for this video. This is only the beginning. The purpose of this video is to strengthen identities and serve as a source of pride for deaf women through their stories. For the first time, they are telling their stories as deaf women about women who are deaf. We hope that you will disseminate, discuss, and share these goals by exploring the intersections of gender, sexism, culture, and women's rights. Thank you for watching.